it's the thought leaders who are really commanding the high fees. It's the thought leaders who are really making the difference and the impact in organizations. It's the thought leaders who are really packaging services and solutions together and not just creating that impact, but generating ridiculous income. You don't need a whole lot of clients when you're getting six figures in one contract. Imagine being able to just relax and focus on helping people. you know this is exactly what we're talking about, and to be able to do that without going to school for years or a decade, without trying to research and write a book, but having a condensed process, super valuable. I'm like borderline emotional here because I'm thinking of all the speakers that I've talked to over the years who are great speakers, but their stuff is sitting on the shelf because they haven't tapped into or tied into the problems that they can help to organizations to solve, and the value that they can deliver. They haven't been able to articulate this or even identify it. Right? They'll say things like, "Well, you tell me what the problem is, and then I'll bring the solution." No. Thought leadership isn't about bringing answers only. It's about not just about problem solving. It's also about problem finding. Find out what they want and give it to them is like the best business advice I've ever gotten. I am talking today with Dr. Karen Koepp, and Dr. Koepp is someone who has worked with PhD candidates. She's a PhD herself and has worked with PhD candidates to help them complete their dissertations, right? So she's sort of like a PhD's PhD, really helps people hone in their ideas for their dissertations and flesh them out and conduct the research necessary to really provide the data and the evidence behind the idea. So how does that help speakers? Well, I'll tell you what, one of the most important aspects when clients are looking at different speakers, one of the things they talk about and think about and ask about and wonder about is this legitimate, right? Is this science-based? Is there evidence to support this idea? Or is this a speaker who's just going to get on our stage, open their mouth, and whatever falls out, falls out? They're going to tell their personal story. They're going to share some woo-woo stuff, right? I hear all kinds of resistance to speakers who are not science-based. But it goes way beyond the speech, people. You can probably not fix a whole problem within an organization in one 60-minute speech. And really the most successful and financially and otherwise speakers have the ability to go far beyond the speech. Okay. We call this business a thought leadership-based speaking business, where you don't just get on the stage, do your speech, and go to the next city, but rather you've got enough expertise where they want to look at you and say, "Hey, we want to bring you in as a consultant. Hey, we want to bring you in as an executive coach. Hey, we want to bring you in as our employee trainer. And we want you to run workshops and put together courses and write books." And this is sort of the dream, maybe even get you on the TED or TEDx stage. And what is the TED tagline? Ideas worth spreading, not speakers worth highlighting, right? So having an idea, right? We say you can't be a thought leader if you don't have thoughts. And sometimes as speakers put together their ideas and their content and their thoughts, and they look back at their life and their experiences, and they know they have something, they feel like, I got something that's valuable here. In order to communicate this, in order to really flesh it out, I'm missing something. And oftentimes speakers feel a sense of the dreaded imposter syndrome. And they feel like, well, I believe this, but who am I to share this message? Or I believe this, but who am I to bring this message to a corporate audience? But imagine having actual legitimate science to back up what you're doing. And if you're the one to conduct that research, suddenly you go beyond just someone who's reporting the facts to someone who is innovating ideas. I think the term research, when we think of it, we think of poring over, going to the library, poring over books, old texts that you can't even get on the internet, obviously scrolling and scrubbing and sitting in a lab with chemicals. Like Well, I don't think most people would say, "Oh yes, I'm a born researcher." Am I thinking about the word research wrong?
Probably. There are many different kinds of research. So, but ultimately, what it is selecting a problem to solve, finding out what is generally known about that problem, where the gaps are in our knowledge about that problem, whether it's we just don't know or we know something, but it's a little spongy. We're not that confident about what's known. Then planning something, going out, doing something, maybe an experiment of some kind, maybe gathering some data, then reflecting on what you gained, and then drawing some conclusions about that.
Yeah.
That's everyday life, from buying a phone to selecting a school to figuring out how to ride a skateboard.
Wow. So this idea of finding the gaps. I remember when I was sitting in elementary school thinking to myself, being an inventor would be a cool job to be when I grow up. But the problem is everything's already been invented. I remember feeling like there's nothing new under the sun, or all the good ideas are taken. In your experience, Karen, are you often finding gaps in knowledge, or does it feel like that elementary school kid felt like, oh, everything's solved, there are no gaps? Obviously, as an elementary school kid in the 1980s, there's been a lot of inventions since then. I was definitely but I guess the question is, what's sort of the percentages? Like, are there times when you find no gaps, that we got that covered, or is it more often that we do find gaps? And what types of gaps are better than others for this type of work?
There's always a new angle for any problem, for any solution. There's always a new angle to be had, to be discovered. And with the elementary school science fair or plans of being an inventor, it can be very overwhelming to be given that task of find a problem, a new problem to solve. There's some, there's a statistic out there that it takes 10 years of really knowing a subject matter to come up with a truly original idea. And so that can be very daunting. But the reality is that, let's say, um, I don't know, pick any invention. Tell me an invention.
Well, I mean, the iPhone is always within arm's reach. People view Steve Jobs as this brilliant inventor. So I don't know if that falls and fits the category, but I'm going to just throw out iPhone or smartphone.
Sure. Yeah. So with an iPhone, there are innumerable things to investigate as research regarding its how it can be used, who it could be used with, what the impact is. So my oldest son likes to tell my youngest daughter that her brain is rotting when she plays a game on a device, and that scares her a lot. But that's an example of research that could be done, is the impact on certain very specific or neighborhoods of brain activity and behavior. And then you could look at it as the impact in certain age groups.
No, that's a really interesting thing, because as innovation and ideas and technology progresses, as there are ideas flooding the world, well, suddenly everything is now new. And because it's new, studying the impact, studying the effects, studying the best practices of how to use and integrate this new technology into our lives is certainly fodder for ideas. And I mean, hey, I have a book on this topic, right? How to how to keep your phone, but also keep your life. But anyway, long story short, the idea that there is all the ideas that are already exist, is silly in some ways when you think about it, because the more there are ideas, the more we need ideas to the more
Yeah.
innovation and content. So
And the more we need thought leaders to cut through the confusion and noise.
I want to quickly take a step back for just a moment, because I know that there are some speakers who feel like they have an idea, but they don't have credibility. I have other speakers watching this, listening to this, who feel like they may not have a fleshed out idea. And I just want to take a quick moment to differentiate between like idea and content and topic, and really what all of this means and how this is sussed out. Because there are some speakers who are literally like, I just want to speak and I want to help people. There is so much that I could talk about. I'm not even sure which conversation I want to enter here. So let's break that down a little bit. I want to start really by looking at topic, right? Speaking topic. What is the speaking topic that you want to speak about? And this is going to be blissfully boring, right? This is going to be something that there are so many other speakers who also speak on this topic. This is not where you stand out. This is where you fit in. We're talking leadership, sales, innovation, collaboration and teamwork. We're talking communication. We're talking diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like, these are just the conversations that are happening in the workplace, the common problems that arise in the workplace. And you decide which conversation you want to enter. That's your speaking topic, right? So they have to be able to look at you and say, you're a leadership speaker, or you're a motivational speaker with a personal story, or you are an innovation speaker and you bring ideas, and ways of developing ideas to our organization. So that's topic. That's the conversation that you want to enter. Now, you can certainly research topics. You can certainly look at what other speakers are doing. You can certainly go to speakers bureaus websites, click on the speakers topics button, and look at all the drop down menus and see where you might be drawn. But at some point, after fitting in, you're going to have to stand out. And the way that we stand out, the best way that we can stand out as thought leaders, is to bring a unique idea to that conversation, right? So your idea really is what you want to say to those people in that topic related to that area. Like, what do you want to tell them? What's the nugget? What's that wisdom that you want to impart? What's the change you're inviting them to make? And then the thought leaders who are really successful, and this is where, Karen, you can help people flesh out the idea. You can help people discover their idea by following their own interests and passions, right? And I want to hear you talk more about that in a moment. But once we have and settled on that idea, then we have to flesh that out into content. Speakers have a fancy term for this. We call it intellectual property. Sometimes we call it our contextual model about how we organize our intellectual property. But this is what takes a speaker from a speaker to an expert and a thought leader. And this is what makes a speaker stand out. Because you could just be a communication speaker, or you could be Daniel Goleman, the father of emotional intelligence, right? And that's not something he invented. This is intellectual property that he has researched and put together and collated and put into a model. So I hope that quick breakdown helps as we talk through things like ideas and content and topics. It starts at the top, topic. Then it goes to what your idea is and what you want to contribute to that topic. And then your model, your IP, is really how they can make that change of your idea. How, step 1, step 2, step 3. And that's the kinds of content that we can develop through this process. So, Karen, I put a pin in something earlier, and I said, I want to hear you talk about it. And that was discovering your topic through your passion. And this is a passion of yours. And I think a lot of people think of this as maybe woo-woo, like follow your dreams, follow your passions. How do we follow our passions?
This is a really big place where I like to begin with anyone I work with, whether it's a graduate student who is needing to do a dissertation, or it's a beginning thought leader. If you think about the amount of resources that you're dedicating to this effort, from just reading about the topic to coming up with your own ideas to conducting research to speaking. It's a massive amount of resources you're investing, massive amount of energy that you need to dedicate. So you need to be in love with that topic. It needs to be so deeply felt in your soul. So how I think about it, and I know you have a Venn diagram as well. My Venn diagram is that I think about the world. The world is full of problems. And then there are people affected by those problems. So those are two circles of the Venn diagram. And then there's you, and you have a unique path that you have traveled in life. And that path had, because of the challenges you've had, the successes you've had, your things that you are uniquely great at, better than anybody else, and the unique ways that you feel like you're making a difference in the world. Like there are many, many ways to change the world. They're all important, but only some will resonate with you and feel like this is important work versus I'm drained at the end of the day and I just want to lay down. So finding those areas, the ways that you feel like you are changing the world in a meaningful way, focusing on the things that you are best at, that you are that you do better than anybody else, whether that's writing, speaking, being funny, recognizing patterns, connecting with people. There are a whole variety of ways to do that. And and then what problems you want to solve, who you want to connect with in doing that, and who you are. Those are my three things.
Yeah, you know, you mentioned this as being the beginning of a process. And you know, I've kind of been a distant third party witness and observing you kind of run through this process with content and ideas and you know with executives and you know I know not a lot of our listeners will know this because really nobody knows this. You're behind the scenes on some pretty awesome people, right? Some pretty high position, powerful sort of movers and shakers, and you are kind of this idea engine and content production factory. And the fact that you have a process allows you to turn out we've worked with a lot of people, Karen. We've never seen anybody come up with the quantity and quality of data, research, information. Like you can take an initial quick conversation, and then the next time we chat, you've got it graphed out. You've done, you know, the analysis, and it's just seemingly uh, done by like Chat GPT or something, right? But we all know that Chat GPT and artificial intelligence, you know, the issue in the area it sort of is lacking is really that true innovation, right? It's great at collating, it's great at taking existing ideas and kind of, you know, culling out the main points and those sorts of things. But as of today, as of this recording, you know, and for the foreseeable future, you know, this innovation and this idea generation is a distinctly human trait. And
Yeah.
reasons like, you know, it's stemming from passion and areas of our own human interests. So the idea of a process is very, very appealing. And the idea that there is a guaranteed outcome from a process like this, and the idea that it is fast is very, very appealing. So, you know, I know that there's a lot of, again, a lot of speakers listening who have a lot of content, but it's disorganized. We have a lot of things that we could speak about. You know, I know a bunch of speakers, and I was talking to one yesterday. He's like, I got 6 different, you know, topics. It's like, wow, it must be hard to be perceived as the top expert in any one of those topics. We say if you chase 2 rabbits, both of them get away, let alone 6, right? And once again, the idea of being a thought leader and positioning ourselves as a thought leader, I cannot overstate the importance to our marketing, right? I cannot overstate the differentiating fact between someone who is an established expert versus someone who is not. So we know the importance of that. Let's say a speaker comes to you and says, Karen, I have an idea. I'm passionate about my idea and my message. This is the message I want to bring to people. And then you hold it up under the microscope and you say, hey, we looked at it and this doesn't have any legs. There could be any number of reasons why it doesn't have any legs. Maybe, I don't know, too much competition. Maybe there's no unique angle. Maybe it's factually incorrect. And the research comes back and says, actually, that is not accurate. We don't want to be spreading false information. So what happens? And again, we're talking about this process of identifying the passions, and we're kind of going through your process here. What happens at the point where the speaker comes to you and has something they're almost married to, and then the process comes back and saying, actually, no? Does that happen, number one? And number two, where do you go from there? Is that a dead end?
Well, when I work with people from the beginning and we're starting at that point of problem, we usually don't get too far down the road before discovering that, because we wade into the water. And tweaking the topic is common. So, for example, I was working with some clients recently where the interest was in helping organizations grow from crisis. And so we gathered some articles and some resources, started reading, and then and he was testing the idea with some people, and a lot of people got confused because they went down the track of PTSD. And so there was some tweaking involved to get that topic dialed in to what leaders are wanting to know, what companies are needing. So there is an interactive process from the start to make sure that where we're headed is calibrated with a need and with what people are ready for, as well as what they're passionate about. When people have gotten a long way down the road on their own, someone I was meeting with the other day was in this situation where she hadn't gotten that feedback around, you need to be narrow, you can't be looking at everything under the sun. And what she ended up with was a huge pile of information and data that just didn't make sense. And she could run a bunch of statistics and make things look really interesting, but it wouldn't be accurate. So then we had a conversation about what she's most passionate about, what is the angle that has resonated most in her career and in the data that she's collected. So whether it's early on, which is preferable, or later on, at some point, you definitely need to dial in and make sure everything's calibrated with what you're passionate about, what makes sense to you as far as what the real problem is, and what companies are ready for and wanting to hear.
Yeah, I'm going to get real serious for a second here. I over and over have been confronted and placed in situations where I'm talking to speakers who have wasted years. And that form of wasting years can be writing books that no one wants to read. That wasting of years can be shouting a message into the void that no one wants to hear. And, Karen, we've kind of glossed over this, and I want to make sure we don't anymore, because you've been interjecting this into the conversation. And I've been saying, like, yeah, oh, yeah, passion. Yes, that's really important. And then you say, yeah, but hang on, then a problem. We have to be able to solve a problem. And I'm like, cool, yeah, passion. And I think a lot of speakers do that. They're like, I want to speak about what I want to speak about. And yes, that has to happen. You cannot show up on a stage and give a B minus because you're not fully invested in that topic. Can't do it, right? There's no need. This is your life this is not a speaking business that you're building. This is like a business that's going to support your life and your passions and your mission and your purpose. So don't dumb it down for a couple bucks, right? Is the idea behind passion. But also the fact that passion fuels and generates and drives all of that, super, super important. So many speakers then are like, okay, but I don't know what I'm passionate about. Fine. Karen's got the process, right? We can find out what your passion is. We can tap into it. We can tease it out. It's there, right? You're on this planet. It is there, period. Now, problem cannot be ignored. We cannot simply say, I'm passionate about this. Give me $10,000 to speak about it. They're going to be like, hold on. No. What are you going to do for me? And if we don't have content that solves a problem, then our fee is going to be stuck at low fee or no fee, right? Business is about solving problems. When you solve problems, you create value. People exchange money for value. Period. End of sentence, right? So we have these two tenets of being a thought leader speaker. We've got passion, but now we've also got problem. And again, I'm like borderline emotional here because I'm thinking of all the speakers that I've talked to over the years who are great speakers, but their stuff is sitting on the shelf because they haven't tapped into or tied into the problems that they can help to organizations to solve. And the value that they can deliver. They haven't been able to articulate this or even identify it, right? They'll say things like, well, you tell me what the problem is and then I'll bring the solution. No. Thought leadership isn't about bringing answers only. It's about not just about problem solving. It's also about problem finding, right? The true sort of innovative thought leaders are like, hey, look, this is the area, right? COVID just happened. This is the area that's going to be a problem. We need to get in front of it, right? This just happened. AI is coming. This is a problem that's going to happen. You need to be in front of it. So this process really does, again, very, very quickly put you at the forefront of this problem solving place. If you can bring a hamburger to a crowd of hungry people, right, then you're in business, right? It's so much more about finding like an audience of buyers and finding out what they want and giving it to them. Find out what they want and give it to them is like the best business advice I've ever gotten. And make sure if you're bringing hamburgers to hungry people, do your research. Make sure it's not the National Vegetarian Society, right? So if you got hamburgers from hungry, don't bring camping equipment and try to sell that to hungry people, right? Don't bring toy cars and try to sell that to bring food to hungry people. So Karen, I interrupted and I don't know if you were in the middle of, I want to give you an opportunity to respond to that. And if not, I'll jump into my next question.
That was very well said. And I love the passion that you bring to that because I agree. It's so important that you have to solve a problem beyond yourself and what you see. And then just adding to that, you also have to know the language that they use to describe that problem and align with that. Mm-hmm. And also be ready to meet them where they are. And that doesn't mean that you have to abandon your passion. By deeply understanding their problem, how they see it, how they talk about it, and what they feel they're ready for, that enables you to adapt your message to show how your passionate area of contribution is what they need.
So glad you brought that up because is it not true that people don't buy what they need? People buy what they want. Organizations are no different, right? I say this often. Yes, companies are groups of individuals, but companies themselves are as unique as individuals, right? So when you think of like the corporate market, there are so many niches within that and so many different opportunities and angles to explore. But the idea that people buy what they want and not what they need, the way you phrased it is putting this content, these ideas, these solutions, let's start calling them that. These are solutions to problems. Putting these solutions in front of them in a way that they're not ready for is not going to get you the win, right? There are people who are far ahead of their time, and then decades or centuries later, society catches up. Well, great, they died poor. They tried. Nobody was able to receive that information or that idea. That does nobody any good, right? So bringing, not dumbing it down, not changing it just to be like, oh, I know that you want a healthy body, but you don't want to diet and exercise. You want cake, so here's cake, right? You've got a Venn diagram. You got to say, look, this is what you need. I'm going to package what you need in a way that you want, right? So that you can, I'm going to take that vegetable, I'm going to wrap it in the mashed potatoes. I'm going to give the kid. So this is partly an idea generation problem. It's also partly a marketing and packaging and positioning problem so that we can effectively communicate those ideas and make the ideas something that they understand that they want it. They understand that they need it, and therefore they do want it. So that's, I think, maybe a little bit beyond the scope of today's call and today's session in terms of marketing and packaging the ideas. Or maybe it isn't. Maybe research plays a big role in that as well. I think it might. So far, Karen, help us to kind of understand this arc, right? Someone comes in and they say to you, look, I want to be a thought leader. I want to segue and transition from just a speaker to a thought leader. I want to open up the floodgates in terms of opportunities to stand on stages and then to work with organizations off stage, right? And this is, by the way, this is, people don't understand this. People, they look at me, I'm a non-celebrity. I'm not a New York Times best-selling author. I didn't invent the Roomba. Even without that, people don't, like, they look at me and they say, Tim, how are you getting these speaking fees? How are you writing contracts that are 5 figures, high 5 figures, 6 figures for a client? How are you doing that? And without being, a celebrity speaker, because we know the Clintons will get hundreds of thousands or $1 million for an appearance, right? But we're not that. Most people watching this are not that. So once again, the answer is thought leadership and solving problems, coming alongside an organization, doing the speech, opening the conversation with that speech, raising awareness on the importance of the topic, and then the organization being bought in and saying, we need what you have. Come on into the store. Let me show you what I got on the shelves. I got some training here. I got some this, I got some that. And we package those things together. And again, that's the sauce right there. That's how you can leverage time and your impact. It's not just about income. It's about the ability to roll up your sleeves and sit with people and help them through these problems. And they're not going to acknowledge you as an expert unless you're an expert, unless you've got the ideas to back this up. So people who want that, Karen, bringing it all back, people who want that, who are watching this and like, man, I want to position myself as a thought leader. Start with their passion. We talk about researching the gaps and finding the problems that exist. Is it okay if I ask you to kind of continue that process and let people know like what the stages and phases are? And then I want to talk about timeframes after that. Like, how long do we spend in each one of these things? I want people to really feel like what it might be like to maybe work with you or go through a process like this. So first of all, one question at a time. What's next? What's next after
Yeah. So just to recap, always starting with them, their passion, then doing a combination of validating with the market. How do they see the problem? What are they ready for? Alongside researching what other thought leaders are saying about that problem so that you are speaking the language, aligning with, so you look like one of the gang that solves these things. Then from that, and reflecting on all of those things, you identify the unique thing that you bring to this that has not been explored in the way that you can explore it and tackle it and solve it in the way you solve it. And then you create your own model, your own framework for tackling it. And ideally have some opportunities, whether it's you realize in the past, oh, I've done this before, and you can talk about those cases and experiences that you've applied this framework and this new model that you've created. Or you engage some new experiences to apply it and then have things to talk about. And then it's in a methodical way of looking at everything that you've learned, done, and gained from all the steps that have come before, that innovation comes into play. Because through that process, which is the research process, you are creating new knowledge that didn't exist before. And that's pretty remarkable. That's exciting stuff.
This is where AI can't really compete
Exactly.
in a really strong way at this point. Tell me about that moment when you work with people, when things start to click, when they start to think, oh, that's right. And this happened in my life, this particular story, or I've got this experience that I can bring. I didn't even realize that would be relevant or important, but now I can talk about this. Oh my God. Like, how excited do people get?
Very excited and also very moved. When you tap into that passion and realize, oh my gosh, my whole life has led up to this moment and doing this. This is where I get emotional because this is where I see people step into their purpose. Because I believe that everyone has come to change the world in the way, you have come into the world to change the world, make it better in the way that only you can. And I believe that for everyone. And through this process, they get to step into that. And that's a spiritual moment. That's huge.
Does it ever happen when the passion and the purpose and the meaning and the drive is just not something anybody wants? Or do you see, like, if the speaker is passionate about it, there are enough other people passionate about it? Uh, Flesh that out for me. And so, I mean, I think there's some concern, like, oh, what if my passion isn't something that pays the bills?
That's why early in the process, we do make sure that we're aligning with the community that we want to have an impact on.
Maybe it's just a matter of getting to the place where we can make that decision intelligently, and we can make that decision on purpose versus by accident. And when you have the facts and you have the data in front of you, you may very well still make that decision to say, look, as you said, this was a spiritual experience. My life has led up to this point. Money ceases to matter for some people, and or maybe they're funded in other ways and they want to take their impact and their purpose and their plan to in that direction. But again, it's got to be an intelligent, informed decision. But at that point, we can make that decision and say, look, this is going to be the path for me moving forward. And I'm not going to be blindsided. I'm not going to be
Right.
someone who puts time and energy and effort in hopes that I'm going to be making a bunch of money when all of this shakes out, and then just get smacked across the face with reality. So we're at the point now in the process where you said, and then that is where you create something truly unique and something truly new that hasn't
Right.
existed before.
Yeah.
Now, what at that point? What happens then?
Yeah. So from that new knowledge, once we have new knowledge, that enables new capabilities. So now that we know what we didn't know before, now we can confidently go to these clients and say, stop doing this, change how you're doing that. This is what you need to start doing. And here are the step by step, here are my recommendations. And I take people through a 360-degree process.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. This is so important. What you just described is what we notice in our world as observing speakers who make it and speakers who don't. We notice that there is something that we just have called conviction, right? It's
Mm,
confidence, but it's also conviction. And when you can stand on a stage and you can confidently deliver information, yes, it's the content itself, but it's also the way it is delivered. It's also the experience that you create. It's also the vibe you give off. And I don't care if you've got the world's greatest content. If you don't believe it, if you don't feel like it's rooted in foundational, like you can stand on that bedrock and preach from the stage, if you don't feel that, the conviction doesn't come across, and the repeats and the rebookings and the referrals don't happen because
mm,
the audience doesn't feel the power of the message. They don't feel
mm,
conviction. So we have not, we've had a hard time quantifying that. We've had a hard, it's definitely a know it when you see it. We watch a lot of videos of a lot of speakers, and sometimes we see a speaker, we start to worry internally. The conviction isn't there. How does that? So when you come along and say, look, these are the ideas, this is the process, and it doesn't take years to do that, right, Karen? I mean, this is something that
Right.
in a very condensed period of time, and
Yep.
then you can look again at the facts and be like, this is this is this is worth it. This is solving a powerful problem, and this is real, and I can stand on this and with conviction deliver these messages. But that is something that differentiates successful speakers from unsuccessful speakers, and again, can't be overlooked, cannot be overstated. Super, super important to have the conviction behind our content.
Yeah. Great. Um, what I was saying is I do a 360-degree process around the problem and what we've learned so that we're really looking under every rock and turning over every leaf to find out what are the innovative opportunities here for everyone affected by this problem. So we really come up with so much incredible insight from this research process when it is done methodically and in an aligned way to make sure it reflects the best of you and the the greatest need that companies are experiencing or whatever your audience is that you're serving.
Karen, this sounds like a lot of work. Well, yeah, welcome to running a business, right? Welcome to gaining a competitive advantage because everybody else is thinking the same thing. This sounds like a lot of work. Not only are they thinking this sounds like a lot of work, they have no idea how to run this process. They have no idea. They're out there telling their personal stories and just saying, go get them, Tiger. And meanwhile, if you can come along and craft and develop content, right? Content is the engine that drives the speaking business. So it drives your marketing, it drives your referrals, it drives your speech and the delivery of the speech itself. So if you can gain that competitive advantage and be willing to put in the work necessary, knowing that there's a path and that there is a plan and that there's an end result, right? And that for me, I know when I sit down to work, if I'm going to work on something, I have no idea if it's going to work. I'm much less motivated, right? But if I know that there's this process I can take, and Karen, having you as the guide through this process, I think is going to help a lot of people. So I think at this point, if I could twist your arm, I don't know if you'd be open to this or willing. And again, I don't know how many of these you'd be able to do, but obviously people are going to be watching this at different points and at different times. And they're also going to be watching it with their own unique experience and thinking through their own ideas. Would you be willing to be a sounding board and to hop on a call with these people individually, hearing their ideas, hearing where they're at in the process, maybe discussing ways that you two might be able to work together and maybe customizing something specific? Because I do think this process is so unique and so individualized, discovering passions. And I mean, it's like therapy, so
Right.
I think for each individual person, there's going to be a different, certainly a different outcome, a different approach, a different nuance to that process. So, first of all, they want to feel like, hey, is it worth it? This is my idea. Are there legs? Is it worth it? Is that something that you'd be willing to discuss or hop on a call and do a little bit of strategy, a little bit of discovery, and see where people are at and where you might be able to take them?
Well, as I mentioned, my greatest passion is helping people find their passions and the pathway forward to make the change in the world only they can make. So I would be happy to do that.
Amazing. So what we'll do is we'll put some kind of link, we'll put some kind of button, below this video so that you can maybe look at Karen's schedule and see if there's any availability to schedule that call. That button may gray out, it may work, it may not work depending on her availability at that particular time, right? So again, we don't know when you're watching this, but if that button is live and if there is availability on Karen's calendar, then I would absolutely encourage you to do this. There is no more important factor to the success of your speaking business than whether or not you can back up, your message, whether or not you have a message, whether or not you have an idea that fits in while standing out, and whether or not you have the materials that come alongside of just an idea that can help create the actual distribution of that idea and help create the actual impact in the world of that idea. So, this is an opportunity to talk with someone who works with pretty impressive people, right? I mean, all day long he's working with PhD candidates. I mean, these are people who you're gonna be rubbing shoulders with some impressive folks, right? Executive leaderships, you're dealing with VPs and C suites, and helping them to be this forward-facing thought leader for their organization and writing articles and Forbes and writing books and getting published. All kinds of cool stuff's going on there. So join a cool club, I guess, is one way to put it. Out really again where you fit in to the speaking space, and how we can build something that is, we haven't talked about this, Karen, but intellectual property can outlast you as the speaker. Stephen Covey is still having an amazing impact on this world after he's passed, because he's crafted and created this intellectual property and these ideas that are bigger than him. So, talk about.
Well, you mentioned several of them: Napoleon Hill, Isaac Newton, throughout the Steve Jobs.
Yes. and we're still talking about these people. So the idea of standing on the shoulders of giants, and then one day, looking back one day and just being like, holy cow, there are people who think I'm a giant. Like, wow, there are people who view me as a thought leader or as an impact creator. And I think that's why people, in many ways, why we got into speaking, is to help, is to move, is to inspire, is to motivate. And honestly, being able to have that impact and generate a ridiculous, unfair income. I mean, it's not fair that we get paid this much money to do what we love to do and to help people. But the difference, we talked a lot about the difference between successful speakers and unsuccessful speakers, particularly in this very specific world of corporate thought leadership based businesses. Speaking of corporations and associations and small to medium enterprises and nonprofit, that's my world. That's my jam. That's where I live. Listen, if you want to go speak to high school kids and get your $1,500 to talk and have the impact on that generation and talk about your personal story and be motivational, that's absolutely viable and fine. And again, but if you've gotten to this point in this recording, in this conversation, then like, wow, there is, and it's exciting too. There's maybe an undiscovered ore, and it just needs to be extracted and mined, maybe polished a little bit. But there is, Karen, you believe this firmly.
Yes.
Everybody's got that, right? Again, hundreds of speakers we talk to, we go deep with speakers. Everybody's got something that, even if it's not a message that's unique per se, there is always that angle that the messenger brings to the message. There are people who you watching this can reach that Karen can't reach. There are people that you watching this can reach that I can't reach, or Tony Robbins can't reach, or Oprah can't reach. Only you can reach that person, right? So I don't want to belabor the point, but I feel like if you feel that same stir, get that call booked, right? Get that call booked. Take this step. Don't be intimidated or daunted by terms like research or innovating ideas or thought leadership. This is absolutely an attainable process. This is an approachable process. And this is something that Karen, as your guide, can walk you through. And don't underestimate the impact and the importance of actually having something to sell, of actually having hamburgers for hungry people, of actually having the conviction behind it, and the fact that the imposter syndrome goes away, and you, or at least is mitigated, because everybody says at every level, oh, imposter syndrome is everywhere. But knowing that when you feel that imposter syndrome, being able to look back and be like, nope, this is solid ground that I'm standing on. Deep breath. I'm standing on solid ground, you know. So encourage you to go ahead and book that call, continue that conversation. Karen, any closing thoughts as we wrap up? Any closing thoughts as we wrap up?
I think you said it so great. Everyone has that ore. It just needs to be extracted and polished, and that we all have someone to reach, some life to change, and let's go change it.
Amazing. All right, get that call booked, and we'll speak soon. Thank you so much, Karen.
My pleasure.